This is part 2 of a 3-part series I recorded with drummer, composer, and Juilliard and New York University professor Billy Drummond. We continued to dive deep into Billy's vinyl collection, including records from his father's collection and records that played a role in Billy's own drumming style, which he has employed with Horace Silver, Joe Henderson, Bobby Hutcherson, J.J. Johnson, Sonny Rollins, Carla Bley, Steve Kuhn, Joe Lovano, and many other musicians of note, as well as his own solo releases. Please like, subscribe, and return for part 3.
Back by popular demand, Billy Drummond at his luxurious home in Orange, New Jersey. So have at it, man. Some of your favorite jazz drumming records, part 2.
Okay. Well, I don't know if these are... I would categorize them as my favorite jazz records. I think what they are mainly is just some records that I have in my collection, which isn't huge or anything. These are just records that I've acquired over the years based on my interest in drumming, jazz drumming, blah, blah, blah.
So you wouldn't call these, they're not your favorites? They're more like
Well,
tools?
I mean, they're records that I like. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're they're just records. I don't want to say favorites because, there's a lot of people that I probably avoided just because it's a given that they're very, 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 very important in the legacy of jazz drumming history. So I've pretty much avoided Max Roach, Art Blakey, Philly Joe Jones, Roy Haynes, Kenny Clark, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams. I mean, it's. I don't think I need to talk about that. I think everybody knows where they stand in the lineage of jazz drumming, and then a lot of their other people that came right after them: Jimmy Cobb, A.T., Billy Higgins, Pete LaRocca, Arthur Taylor. I think I might even mention those guys a little bit, just on records pertaining mainly to the records that I grew up listening to because of my family. My father had those records, and now I have them. And my mother and my sister Sheila, with the Roberta Flack thing, I think I talked about, and that had some great drummers on those records. But so these aren't like, I'm not trying to tell anybody you got to listen to these people or anything like that. It's just more just like this is what I have at hand. I'm not an expert. I'm not a historian. I'm not a collector. These are just records that I have that, I think might be of interest. If you came over to my house and we were hanging out, I might say, hey man, have you ever heard this? Check this out. Or if you, are you hip to that? Because that's how I learned when I was growing up, and people would turn me on to stuff. Even to this day, Kenny Washington, one of my dearest friends and mentor and serious jazz historian, jazz drumming historian, turns me on to stuff all the time. And, every time I talk to him, and I talk to him all the time, and every time I talk to him, I learn something. So this is just it's casual. So some things of interest, some things I tried to put together some kind of I don't know, I guess you would say thematic material or things that relate to one another in a certain kind of a way that pertain to jazz drums. So that's really kind of what this is. This is just like, hey, check this out. You don't have to like it. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but that's what it is. And it's mainly people from my experience, people that I listen to, and a lot of people from the past, a lot of people that might not be active anymore or might not be around anymore or might just be kind of unnoticed, because there's so many great drummers in jazz history that don't get the same kind of accolades as Tony Williams or Philly Joe Jones. And not that they don't deserve those accolades, but I'm just saying they don't get that, but they were working and they made some music with some people, and I happen to have them on records. So that's what I'm kind of like trying to shine some light on those people that did stuff that you might be interested in. There's all kinds of music that was made, and everything ain't brand new as far as I'm concerned. So I guess the first thing I'm going to start with is the reason why I brought this one up. This is a band that was put together by the great Max Roach, and it's a band called Boom, and it's basically a percussion ensemble, and it has some of the great jazz drummers in the ensemble playing various percussion instruments. They all had to be able to play various percussion instruments. They all had to be able to compose, and some of these guys in here in this band are some of my favorite jazz drummers, as well as wonderful percussionists. So this is a band. I don't know when he put this together. I want to say the early, maybe 1970, 1971, I would say. And it's called Boom. And these are just a couple of the records. This is a Japanese record on Bay State, the Bay State label. And then there's another one here on Soul Note, the Italian label. And I have a couple of other ones on CD. They did do one for Columbia, and they did one for another label too that I can't remember the name of.
How did you like the one on Columbia compared to Boom Collage?
It had been around. It had been around a while by that time. I like them all for what they are. I mean, they're not. It's not necessarily like hard bop or bebop or it's what Max intended it to be, was like a percussion ensemble from the African American jazz perspective. And it features, Joe Chambers, Roy Brooks, Freddie Waits, Warren Smith, Ray Mantilla, Omar Clay. It's had different people, Eli Fontaine, Fred King, and so on and so forth. So it kind of went through different incarnations as the band matured. But Max Roach was at the helm of it, and just having all these guys playing at the same time, playing timpani, playing xylophone, vibraphone, chimes, hand percussion, trap drum set, all kinds of percussion is fascinating. And the reason why I thought of this is because I just saw Boom a few weeks ago up at Marcus Garvey Park. It was part of the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival, and it was led by Bobby Sanabria. He did a great job. But they had horns with it, and but Warren Smith was there, one of the original members, playing timpani. He's like, I don't know, 90 years old, 91 years old. He's incredible. And I saw him maybe about 30 years ago do a solo percussion ensemble, and he was playing like monk tunes on the timpani, and just fascinating. And he's also a great drummer, and he's played with all kinds of symphony orchestras, Broadway, tons of studio stuff. He was a member of Tony Williams's Ego band, which is the band that Tony formed after Lifetime broke up, along with Don Elias, which was kind of a mini Boom to a certain degree. It was Boom with a rhythm section, basically, kind of. Don Elias was on congas. Warren was playing timpani and all kinds of percussion. Tony, of course, was on drums with Ted Dunbar. And Junie Booth was the bass player, I think, for most of the live gigs. But Ron Carter is on bass on the record, and so is Jack Bruce. So anyway,
who wrote the music for those records?
For which ones?
Like
these?
those, yeah.
Oh, these are like all people from within the band. Joe Chambers wrote a lot of it. Joe Chambers wrote all of this one.
Wow.
Because Joe Chambers is not only one of my favorite drummers, but he's also one of my favorite composers. He wrote a lot of the music for some of those Blue Note Bobby Hutcherson records, and he wrote the title track for Freddie Hubbard. No, not the title track, but he wrote Mirrors for Breaking Point for that record, Freddie Hubbard's record. So and I'm going to get to him right now. I'm going to get to Warren. Speaking of Warren Smith, but he also did a couple of duo records. This is just vinyl stuff that I have, so I can't go in deep into the CD stuff, but the vinyl stuff, these are duo records. These are direct to disc recordings from Japanese label, Japanese RCA. They're 45 direct to disc. This is a duo with a Japanese piccolo flute, alto flute player, and this is one with a Japanese saxophonist. And Warren is playing percussion, all kinds of percussion. It's fascinating to hear it. He's brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. Warren Smith. If you guys don't know about him, check him out. He's still very much with us. Another person that's also part of M Boom was a drummer named Freddie Waits, who was a fantastic drummer. He's on some Blue Note records. He's on a ton of records. He's contemporary of, I would say, Billy Hart and Joe Chambers and people like that. He was also part of a group called Colloquium, which was a drum group that was Freddie Waits, Horace Arnold, and Billy Hart.
Did they record?
They never recorded, at least not that I know of. Maybe they did some gigs that somebody might have a recording of, but they did have an article, a cover story in Modern Drummer years and years and years ago.
Huh.
But I don't know why the band never materialized, but it was one of those percussion groups, drum set, all three drum set players playing at the same time, which is an interesting thing to do. I've had a chance to play gigs where it was two drummers. One time I did a recording with Victor Lewis playing at the same time, which was fantastic. And I did a couple of gigs with him with that same band, and then I did a week with Andrew Cyril, which was fascinating as well, just to hear someone else playing the same instrument, approaching the same music that you're playing with from a different point of view. And so you have to kind of compliment what they're doing and not get in the way, and at the same time they're doing the same thing with you, so you have to really pay attention.
What did you think of that album? And you had a similar album coming out at ECM, I think it's Pieces of Time with Milford and Andrew Cyril, I think.
Right.
Piere Favre. What's your take on that record?
I mean, I've heard that record. I don't own it. I mean, it's a challenging thing to do, to play with other drummers. We don't often get a chance to do that, like saxophone players and trumpet players and people in big bands and all that kind of stuff. So we don't get a chance to do that. And most of the time, if it's improvisatory, then you really have to listen and have a, maybe talk about, have a goal in mind for a particular piece or whatever, but you really have to listen, intently to things so that you're not in the same sonic area that they are. If they're playing up high, bells, cymbals, then maybe you should be down lower with mallets on tom-toms, and vice versa, just to create a complete sonic picture instead of overloading in one particular sonic area. That's my opinion, but I haven't had that much experience doing it. But so anyway, Freddie Waits is on. Here's a couple of other records he's on. This is a fantastic record called Time for Tyner by McCoy Tyner on Blue Note. Lee Morgan record. This might be Lee Morgan's last recording on Blue Note. Charles McPherson, New Horizons. But Freddie Waits is on tons of records, and his son is a fantastic drummer playing now, Nasheed Waits. Also, a very interesting record that Freddie is on is Jack DeJohnette's piano album, where Jack is playing piano, Eddie Gomez is playing bass, and Freddie is playing the drums. And this is some great Freddie Waits and some great Jack DeJohnette on piano. I don't know if everybody knows it, but Jack started off as a pianist, and he can really play the piano. So this was his piano album. One of the other drummers in M Boom was a drummer named Roy Brooks, who I got to see when I was about 13, 14 years old with his band called The Artistic Truth. And he's on tons of records as well. He was Louis Hayes' replacement with Horace Silver. He's from Detroit, from the Detroit School of Drumming. And he was a fascinating player. One of the things that he did that was very interesting, and I saw him do this, was he had a thing hooked up to his drums called the breathatone, which was in the air vents of the drums, he would have plastic tubes going into them, and he'd have the drums tuned down, not low but medium tuning, so that when you blow into the pitch raises on the drums. And there's a documentary on him on YouTube where he's doing that, and I saw him do it, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
He blows into it and raises the pitch while he's playing?
While he's playing, he has all of the tubes gathered into like a mouthpiece, so that they're all there. So he's playing the drums, and he's rolling around the drums, and the drums are like as if you were playing a timpani with the pedal, but it's air. Because if you fill up the drum with air, the pitch changes. Like if I blew into this drum and started tapping, the pitch would change rapidly. Wow. So I saw him do that. It's called the breathatone. It was kind of his invention. And he's actually on these two records right here. Actually, these three records: Yusef Lateef, the Golden Flute, Dollar Brand or Abdullah Ibrahim, the Children of Africa. He's using it on there. And Hilton Ruiz, Stepping into Beauty, he's doing it on there. He does it he has some records out besides these under his own name, Roy Brooks and the Artistic Truth, where he really does it.
How would you describe the music on this record, his record?
This record is just basically, kind of hard bop. It's Woody Shaw, George Coleman, Hugh Lawson on piano, Cecil McBee, live at the Left Bank Jazz Society in Baltimore, called The Free Slave. It's just straight ahead, but it's great. He's great. And he actually wrote some good tunes, The Smart Set and a few other tunes, The Prophet and things. So he was a composer and a wonderful drummer, and could swing. There's some Chet Baker records that he's on that are fantastic. He played with Mingus. Bad guy, man. One of the other drummers, of course, and he doesn't really need much introduction. Everybody knows him. He's one of my favorites, and a huge influence on me is Joe Chambers. He's on several very, very important Blue Note records in the 60s. He's also a great vibraphonist, a great composer, orchestrator, and a fantastic drummer. So he was another one of these drummers that was in M-Boom. This is a record that, I don't know if this ever came out on CD, but this is called the Amoravid. And he wrote most of the music on here, and he's playing great. He's a contemporary of Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette, J.C. Moses, those people. And he's brilliant, and he's still very much with us today, and still very much active playing. So I could do a whole program on him, I guess, So, but anybody that knows jazz and has jazz records would know about Joe Chambers. He's also a very wonderful pianist, and this is kind of an interesting recording of Joe Chambers on piano, solo piano.
Why is it interesting?
Because he's Joe Chambers and he's playing solo piano. You can't get too many drummers that would do a solo piano record, So another percussion group that I don't think stayed together, but they at least did this record. This is a record put out on ECM called Percussion Profiles, and this has Freddie Studer, Piere Favre, Ramao, David Friedman, Jack, and George Gruntz playing keyboards, and probably did some of the compositions on here. But this is an interesting record. Very well recorded, and you can see on the back the setup with all the drums. Everybody's switching off on drum sets and gongs and marimbas, and they all have their own solo piece in here. So this is an interesting just percussion record. This is a very rare record.
I have never ever seen that.
Kenny Washington turned me on to this years ago, and so every time I would go to Japan in the 80s and 90s, I would search for it, and I finally found it.
What's the title?
It's called, what is it called? I don't know what it's called. Drums Night Philly Joe Jones Quintet +2 at Storyville.
Wow.
So this is Philly Joe Jones and his band with Al Foster and Billy Hart playing drums.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're all playing at the same time?
Yeah, they're all playing. They're all trading. They're playing. They're trading courses. It's fascinating.
Wow.
And Philly Joe is the leader.
Huh.
And when I talked to Al and Billy about this, they were all saying how nervous they were. And tons of people were in the audience. Max was in the audience, I think. Art Blakey, Haynes, Papa Joe.
Wow.
All the drummers came out to see it. So that on top of Philly Joe being the leader and Philly Joe being who he was to Al and Billy, then you have the extra added pressure of Art Blakey and Max Roach and Roy Haynes, and I think Kenny was even there. Kenny said he was even there. So anyway, fascinating record.
Mid '80s, that what you said?
This is I can't see, 77.
Oh wow.
There was a lot of drum records put out by companies in the 50s and 60s that some of them were cool and some of them basically they're compilations. So, but this one is probably one of the most famous one. I only have volume 2. Gretsch Drum Night at Birdland, featuring all these drummers were endorsers of the Gretsch Drum Company.
Do you think those are their hands?
I don't know. Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe they are. But anyway, so it's some of their main endorsers at the time: Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, Charlie Persip, and Philly Joe Jones. And again, this is one of those kind of things where they're trading and playing. One person plays a chorus, the other person plays the next chorus, and all that kind of stuff, kind of a feature for themselves. But this is, I don't have volume 1, but this is volume 2.
Did you ever hear that Roulette was a Mafia run label?
I don't know anything about that.
Okay.
I mean, I have no idea, but I mean, truth is stranger than fiction, so perhaps so. During that time, all kinds of things were happening. Yeah, so, and I know people that went to this. Lyndon White
sealed?
went. Yeah, this is sealed.
Oh, wow.
Because I have the CD.
Damn.
So I haven't even opened it. I had it in a thing on my wall. I was just putting it on my wall.
Sweet.
And in the same vein as that, but not exactly, just drum records that are basically compilation. I think I probably mentioned one last time called The Big Beat, which Philly Joe and Max and Elvin and Art Blakey. But these are some other ones. This is Drum Roll Volume 8, and it's got Buddy Rich, Cozy Cole, Max, Art Blakey, Roy Haynes, Lionel Hampton, and Shelly Manne and Willie Rodriguez. And this is just culled from different records that they're on, probably that recorded for Mercury MRC. There's a lot of these. This is volume 2, and this has Buddy Rich, Charlie Persip, Gene Krupa, Louis Bellson, and Ed Thigpen.
Wow. Are they all called Drum Roll?
The different volumes are called Drum Roll.
I'm not aware of this at all. Wow. And I know that one, but I've never seen the one in your hand.
Oh, okay. And then this is Son of Drum Suite. There was one called Drum Suite, which I don't have. I think I might have it on CD. But this is Son of Drum Suite. And this has Don Lemon, Mel Lewis, Charlie Persip again, Louis Hayes, Jimmy Cobb, and Gus Johnson. So all great drummers, and all drummers that had been involved in jazz music making during the 50s and 40s and 60s. And so it's just culled from different recordings that they're on. So it's great examples of these guys playing. Hi-Fi Drums, Buddy Rich, Chuck Flores, Louis Bellson, Dave Black, Alvin Stoller, Stan Levy, and Irv Kotler.
Who's Dave Black?
Dave Black was an incredible technician.
Really?
If you go online and see some video footage of him, he's kind of out of the Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, unbelievable technique. Just ridiculous. Really like hand snare drumming.
He played with Duke.
Yeah, he played with Duke, and there's some other stuff that he did. I'm not sure all of his whole history, but he was certainly a drummer that was an incredible technician.
Or if that's Buddy on that cover, it looks like his head.
Yeah, that probably is. It looks like his setup too, which was kind of the typical big band setup at the time, except for there's no splash cymbal here, where Buddy usually has one. But the two floor toms, and that was kind of the Gene Krupa model that everybody kind of ended up doing.
Oh, 2 floors, right.
Yeah, 2 floor. But Papa Joe put one over here instead of 2 there. So his two floors were like right there, like that. Papa Joe, and he would do his cross stuff, Incredible. This is another kind of compilation of you can see the names: Philly Joe, Kenny Clark, Elvin, Max, Jimmy Cobb, Albert Heath, Art Blakey, Louis Hayes, A.T. called from different Riverside recordings. And again, Kenny Washington went so far as to make me a CD of this, and then make me a CD of the full tracks that these drum solos are from, because these are mainly fading into the drum solos,
right.
Which is great, because then you hear everybody's vocabulary, which is fascinating. Called Drum Ode, and he actually makes before, at the beginning of the record, he makes a statement about drums and how the drummers in his life had influenced him so much in his music. And this has Jeff Williams, Bob Moses, and then Barry Ottrell, Badal Roy on percussion, on tabla, Colin Walcott on tabla, Patato Valdez on congas, and this is great, and Jeff and Bob Moses are playing the drum sets on here. It's really great to hear them. Jeff Williams is very much here.
So, Billy, you're not an expert?
No, I'm a practitioner.
You're a practitioner?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means I'm practicing to be an expert.
What you got next?
Next, I have one of my favorite drummers of all time, and he's still very much with us. And he's one of those guys that does so much, can do so many different things. And his name is Victor Lewis. And
Never seen that record.
This is a record that was put out by Audio Quest, the cable company. And
Joe Harley's the producer?
Joe Harley's
the
producer, and recorded it and everything with all Audio Quest cables,
Wow.
of course. But they did several records. I have 3. I have a James Newton record with Sunship, and I have a Larry Willis record with, I believe Ben Riley is on that. Or maybe it's Victor, I can't remember. But anyway, this is a great record called Family Portrait, and Victor's he wrote most of the music on here, and he's a great composer too, and he's a great drummer, and he's super versatile, super creative. I have him on records with, well, he's mainly known for the records that he did with Woody Shaw in the 70s. Woody Shaw, when he was recording for Columbia, and there's a bunch of them in here. I won't pull them all out, but that's where he, I think, came to international prominence, was playing with Woody Shaw. But he also played with David Sanborn. He played with Carla Bley. He played with Oliver Lake. He can kind of do everything, and he does everything really well. He's just the consummate drummer.
He has some health troubles at the moment, doesn't he?
I think so. Yeah, he's having some health issues, but hopefully he's going to be back and back playing. And he's a great composer too, and he can do it all. He's one of my main influences, and I think more people should be aware of him.
What's on the back of that record? Okay.
There's the back of it. There's Victor, cool. And there's the personnel, and it's great. And it's a great sounding record too, by the way.
I bet.
Because it was done by Joe Harley's got a good ear for that kind of stuff. And perhaps the Audio Quest cables helped. For all you audiophiles that like Audio Quest, here's another record that Victor's on that I love, where he does a duet. They play a Charlie Parker tune.
Kenny Barron record. Yeah.
Dexterity, yeah, this Kenny Barron record that Victor's on, and just duo between Victor and Kenny Barron playing super fast. It's burning. It's really incredible.
Wow.
So yeah, Victor's Victor's great. Here's another record of his that he's on with Carla Bley. That if you played this, they wouldn't be able to tell it was Victor Lewis. Just like if there was a David Sanborn record that I have that he's on, you wouldn't be able to tell it was, because he's not trying to play whatever these styles require him to play. He actually is playing them legitimately because he's like that. He's got a lot of information that he can tap into when he plays. So that's why I really like him. His the guy that replaced him when he left Woody Shaw was a dear friend of mine, and he passed away, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago maybe by now. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but he was a dear friend of mine. Everybody loved him. His name was Tony Reedus. He was a drummer from Memphis, and he played with tons of people too. Benny Golson, Bobby Hutcherson, Joe Henderson, Art Farmer, Freddie Hubbard.
Did he have his own records on Crisscross?
I think he had a couple on Crisscross,
right.
And he had a couple of other ones too on some Japanese labels. But this might be his very first record when he replaced Victor. And this has some very early Mulgrew Miller on here. There's Gary Bartz, Stafford James, there's Tony Reedus, Steve Ture, and there's Mulgrew. And this might have been Tony's first record. But he had a way of playing that was very unique, and he just had a nice lope and a nice feeling, and everybody loved him. I'll miss him. I miss him every day. He's also on this record, one of Mulgrew Miller's groups called Wingspan, and this has Kenny Garrett, Steve Nelson on vibes, Charnette Moffett, and Reedus and Mulgrew. This is a great record too. Mulgrew's gone too. Unbelievable. Another drummer that I really love, and he doesn't really need any introduction because he's so well known, having been the second drummer with Ornette Coleman, and I'm talking about Ed Blackwell.
Who was the first drummer? Billy?
Billy Higgins was the first drummer. So Ed Blackwell replaced Billy Higgins, and went on to make equally as great records with Ornette. So I just brought out some records that he's on that aren't Ornette, but related somewhat to Ornette. The first one is a record by Charles Brackeen. This is on Strata East, and this is called Rhythm X.
It's a valuable record.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is a great record, and
Did you pay for that?
It's very. I don't know. I bought this in Japan. It looks like. It's very Ornette-ish because Brackeen and Cherry and Charlie Hayden, but Blackwell sounds so great on here, and I'm a big fan of Charles Brackeen, especially those two records that he made with Paul Motion on ECM.
That's like a $500 record now.
Is that right?
Yeah, we sold one at Jazz Record Center not a while ago on auction. Yeah, all the Strata East stuff. And and it's still in the shrink wrap. People get very excited about the shrink wrap. Yeah,
this is great. This is really great. This is a fantastic record. Great Blackwell, who has a unique way of playing, being from New Orleans, being a Max Roach devotee, and having studied drumming in Africa, in Ghana. So that combination really comes up with a really unique way of approaching the drum set. And so I'm a huge fan of his, of Ed Blackwell. Here's another record of his that's very revealing of his way of playing, just Duo with Dewey Redman. Again, related in some ways to Ornette, but Ornette's not on here. It's just the two of them, and it's a fantastic view. The stuff that he did with Old and New Dreams Band is fantastic as well. Here's another one on ECM called The Struggle Continues by Dewey Redman, and this is some great Blackwell on ECM. This has Charles Eubanks on piano and Mark Elias on bass with Dewey. And they're just playing tunes, but it's great. It's fantastic. Another drummer who's probably most well known for being the drummer on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show. And this guy's name is Ed Shaughnessy. He's not with us anymore, neither is Blackwell, unfortunately. But Ed Shaughnessy was also like a pretty active studio drummer in New York prior to him moving out to California to do that show. But he was a great drummer just all the way around. Session drummer, big band drummer, small group drummer. And 2 records that he made for Count Basie, subbing for Sonny Payne at the last minute, from what I understand, which is pretty remarkable. And they're both thematic records. This one is called Hollywood Basie's Way. Count Basie and his orchestra, and there's the gatefold, and Shaughnessy. I know that he was. I had some correspondence with him years ago, and he was very, very proud of these records that he made with Basie, because you got to remember, a lot of those guys' role model was Papa Joe, and Basie's was the epitome of swing, big band swing, you know. Right. And so to play with Basie was like you've made it. Right. To play with Basie or Duke Ellington. And so even Buddy Rich was always down to play with Basie if he could, because that was just, you know. So these 2 records, this is the other one. This is more like show music. So they're doing Strangers in the Night, From a Man Could Get Killed, A Fine Romance from Swing Time, Hurry Sundown Blues from State Fair. These are, you know, like, you know, Broadway kind of shows. But Mr. Shaughnessy is, whew, man, these are incredible. On some of those compilations, the Gretsch Drum Night in Birdland and some of those drum roll records, was a drummer who was also an unbelievable big band drummer, unbelievable studio drummer in New York, unbelievable small group drummer. He was most known for his tenure with the Dizzy Gillespie big band. He's also on Sunny Side Up with Dizzy, with Sonny Stitt and Sonny Rollins. But he did, his first record as a leader was called Charlie Persip and the Jazz Statesman. And this is just kind of a straight ahead, kind of hard bop record, but he's playing solos, clean as a whistle. Really incredible record. I think this might be Ron Carter's debut recording. Freddie Hubbard is on here, Roland Alexander, Marcus Belgrave, the Detroit trumpet player, Ronnie Matthews. This is fantastic, and Charlie Persip is he was in his prime, just really playing fantastic drums.